like to thank Ben and Julio for talking about these things. It's not easy to get up here and talk about this kind of thing. I'm sure people appreciate that. But we'll throw it open for questions and discussion now. So if people have got questions or want to contribute, perhaps they can just introduce themselves as well if they do. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm also called Ben. I'm from a group called Payday. We've been running a website called Refusing to Kill since 2003, and it's a website we sort of started to support soldiers who were refusing to go to war. And I wanted to ask you, how did you, two questions really. One, your personal experience, how did you get out of the military? Was that, were you becoming some conscientious objector, or you ended your contract? Tell me more about that. And secondly, I was curious to know, what was the situation with your comrade and the other soldier? Was there also that process of realizing that being in the military was no longer what they wanted to do, and etc.?
Yeah, I can do. So, before my last year of uni, before I went to seminary, before I joined the anti-war movement, I found love in life. Had I not, I probably would have been a conscious ejector, but I really didn't want to become a conscious ejector because it would have messed up my immigration without fail. So there's a lot of things I would have done to be a bit more extreme in my anti-war activism had I not wanted to start a family with my wife. I left active duty, well no, let me see. No, I left the reserves, actually, I remember it was November 2016. Trump got elected. So that was the last straw for me to, even as a chaplain assistant in a nonviolent role, hypothetically, if we went to war, I might have had to shoot somebody, but yeah, Trump being elected, what I went to do, I was switched to what's called the inactive ready reserves. So that let me leave quietly. I did not want to make noise. I was also finishing my master's degree at the time, and because of the immigration process, my master's degree, I was officially broke. So I couldn't really make a fuss of leaving the military like I wanted to. So then the process of realizing, did my friend go through that? To be honest, he doesn't like to talk about it. His leaving the military, I think, was because he had to deal with his last deployment, and friends of his had died, and he was tired of getting more tattoos of his friends memorial. But that being said, we never had like a frank conversation about it. I'm only making assumptions based off my experience. I think that answers.
I would like to know what Ben's experience is also about that.
About leaving the military and...
So leaving the military, I was sent home from leave in Iraq. I was on a deployment in Iraq doing that job I was telling you about, and I decided that I couldn't do it anymore, or wouldn't do it anymore, more precisely. And I went and asked for an interview with my CO, and it was like going to see the headmaster, you know, like when you stood outside the door of the headmaster's office. And I was pretty nervous, and I didn't really. Obviously, I had a whole load of reasons why I wasn't serve Iraq anymore, but I just kept it simple. I think at the time it was. I'm not redeploying to Iraq. I don't believe in the occupation of Iraq. I'm not serving under American command, which I've been serving under American command at the time, and kind of like push that problem over to him and see what's come back. I thought I was going to get sent to jail at the time, but. Luckily for me, I'd been in the military for 8 years. I was one of the sort of like, you know, I was expected to stay in for the whole 22 years and all the rest of it, and I think people had a certain amount of respect for me. So I was what's called released from army service, which just means it's incredible, the military. You know, like there's this big book of rules called the Queen's Regulations, and it basically gives the CO, the commanding officer, carte blanche to do whatever they want. If they want, they can hammer you, send you to prison for the rest of your life, maybe, or they can do nothing. And it really is, they just need to find the right clause. And luckily for me, the CO I had at the time was a very sort of compassionate and intelligent person, and decided that it was probably best for me and best for the army if I was just sort of like released immediately. Yeah, so that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. a number of points I want to make. First of all, I mean, the military, the various arms of the military, they go to colleges. They even at the top ends of schools, and they do present. And then there are these ads on telly. They do present an incredibly positive view of what the army is, and they offer things like we stopped a great nephew from joining the army because they would pay for him to train to be a doctor if he went to the doctor. My daughter got almost swept into the Air Force because they trained and she was very keen at that point to become a pilot. How can you, I mean, as an organisation and the Stop the War movement, counter that? Get into the colleges, get into the schools when there are these careers days and things like that, and tell them the truth of actually what's. And I was going to say to Martin, maybe it is to say you've got this glamorous view of what a soldier is and how a soldier is respected by the country and so on and so on. Just look at the situation of ex-soldiers and you see how much this country values them, how many ex-soldiers are sleeping on the streets, how many ex-soldiers are in mental hospitals, how many ex-soldiers are in prisons. That's how much we value soldiers. So you've got this glamorous presentation of what a soldier is and how valued a soldier is from that kind of propaganda. And it's powerful and it's effective. Not effective enough actually, they've got a recruitment crisis, haven't they? But how can you counter that?
Well, the thing is maybe you can't counter it. I mean, for quite a few years I went to schools and gave talks, and I think those talks were effective, but I maybe gave 10 talks a year to 30 kids, so what, 300 kids. During that time the military spoke to 100,000 kids, and who knows the numbers, right? So you've got to look at these things practically as well.
Yeah.
You know, and like, have we really got the time and resources and all the rest of it, and the money, to compete with these guys? And not just competing with the military. You know, I read this incredible investigation into how the military in America, so you can, maybe it's happening in the UK, but it definitely happens in America, and these things affect us anyway, fund Hollywood films. And so films get given the latest state-of-the-art helicopters and equipment and all the rest of it to make it look, you know, really realistic and all the rest of it. So can we really compete against that? And the military's an advantage here, you know, so there's an incredible dropout rate in the military. So when people join, a high percentage drop out. But those people are never in the recruitment videos. It's the people who've survived. The people who are still in the military 10 years later, 15 years later. Now, I'm still mates with lots of people who've done 10, 15, 20 years in the military. And they're like, Ben, it was good for us. You know, look at us now. Well, it was good for them. Ask the people who dropped out, or the people who left young, or the people who left after 3 years. Maybe a different story. So it's very difficult to sort of count this. And also, you know, they're holding certain trump cards, you know, the patriotism card, the defence of the nation card, and all the rest of it. So as I was saying to the gentleman at the back there, you know, I would rather that we focused on the foreign and defence policy of this country, which I think is winnable. I think the majority of this people are quite comfortable with our military being used to defend these islands, full stop. You know, at the minute, we've got troops deployed in 80 countries around the world. I think that people would be quite happy for us to withdraw those troops back to the UK. We've got permanent bases in 14 countries. 14 countries. You know, our Defence Secretary, he's actually gold dust, he's such a lunatic. Bless him, exactly, yeah. I think that's the kind of like collective response to him. You know, he's talking about a base in Asia and a base in the Caribbean and all the rest of it. I mean, where are they going to get the money from for this, you know? But I think that's the argument we can win. We can win the argument to bring our troops back from those 80 countries. We can win the argument to close those bases around the world in 14 different countries. We can win the argument to reconfigure our military to one of defence. And you can use loads of it. You don't have to use ideological arguments for that. You can use economic arguments, it makes sense. But also you can use military arguments. At present, our military is incapable of defending these islands. Incapable. They are set up for expeditionary warfare. They're set up to go to the Middle East. They're set up to go to North Africa. They are not set up to defend these islands. An aircraft carrier is of no use or of no extra use, extra benefit in the defence of these islands. When we look at the real threats that this country faces, possible threats, and I'm not talking about countries because there's no, I don't think there's a single country in the world with a stated foreign policy to invade and occupy Great Britain. Can anyone challenge me on that? The country that's got that state policy?
Yeah, my country time.
So rather than talking about policies, let's talk about technology that a future states might deploy against us. You know, when the First World War started, people were shocked at how these weapons were then deployed when a state-on-state war happened. So we'd been fighting all these wars in Africa and against these sort of tribes and using this modern technology against people with spears. And then it was a shock when we came up against the country using the same stuff against us. So imagine all those weapons that we've been using in Iraq and Afghanistan, the drones, the sophisticated stuff at GCHQ, the weapons of incredible explosive power. Imagine that being used against us. We can't defend against that. So we could easily win an argument in this country to restructure our armed forces, to repurpose our armed forces, and to concentrate on defence. And do you know what? It's a step in the right direction if that 40, 60 billion a year is used, even if there's no one with a state aim of attacking us, to defend these islands rather than to attack other people. And I think we can win that. We can win that argument. If you carry out a survey, 75% in favour, I reckon. But we're never going to win the argument about you shouldn't join the military. It's a completely different argument. It's attached to so much within our culture and society. It's counterproductive to even start it, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? So Julio?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with Ben. Especially, I'm glad you mentioned Hollywood because part of the thing that he mentioned also was that if you do use like tanks and the latest weaponry, whatever, is that the military can adjust your script to fit a more patriotic bent. So this is why American movies that have these things are so very patriotic. And it doesn't help, to be honest, because I know I personally I love those movies, and it's taken me a long time to not like those movies. But I know everybody that I know loves those movies. The positive message and the like, again, like I use the glory phrase, it's like, it's a glorious war. Well, anyway, off the topic, we'll talk about just war theory another time, but these movies we're not just wars, it's a just wars by virtue of their excellent videography, for lack of a better phrase. I don't know. And then again, even if there is like this whole look at how people have suffered, the hospitals, prisons, etc. Like, at least in America, we have a bad habit of being like, well, that's not me. You know, it's fine. In the anti-war movement in America, I was part of the Iraq Veterans Against War, who are now about Face Veterans Against War. They had the Drop the Mic campaign, military-industrial complex. And they talk about defunding the Defense Department, demilitarizing communities, and the just transition from the war industry to something more green and wonderful towards living life. And my understanding is Britain has quite the issue. I know from where my wife is from in Preston, BAE is all over the place. The point I'm trying to bring is that if, even my dad at some point made munitions when he lived in the Bronx in the 70s, and I know he's not the only one in my family that somehow helps with that stuff. And my friends in various war industries. Until you could defund the billions of dollars worth of jobs that some people have. Good luck trying to dissuade people from joining the military or the money spent on military contracting. And then even in America, and again, I don't know how it is here, I think y'all are better with guns than in America, but I know one of the things that helped stop my patriotism was when I saw video footage of, now I'm drawing a blank on Missouri, where Michael Gardner got shot. But they had armored personnel carriers, and they had rifles, and they had body armor, and I'm just like, why are they using military weaponry? And I found out doing my thesis for the seminary that American policy has a habit of recycling old stuff and selling it off to the police forces and selling it to like border patrol. And so it's one of those things where you see like a movie of police in America, they all have guns. You'll see over time how the weapons got fancier, and half of that is because they recycled the old military weapons. So they went from 6-shooters to semi-automatics in the 80s because of stuff from Vietnam. You get my drift. My point is there's so many things you have to stop before even people would care about, oh, poor ex-soldier sleeping on the streets or whatever. And it's a powerful cultural message to change. Even because even sometimes I get nostalgic for the days of old, you know what I mean? And I'm in the anti-war movement. Good luck trying to get rid of everybody else that could care less about people dying, you know what I mean? But I say keep it going, don't let me say dissuade you from it. I say keep it going because I'll be damned if we stop trying, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying it's daunting to just give you like a message of how we should stop this when we got to band together and keep the movement going and get more people a part of it. So,
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Perhaps I could finish on a slightly more upbeat note. Just over 10 years since an Iraqi journalist, a guy called Muqtada al-Zadi, threw his shoes at US President Bush. And in 2008, at a press conference in Baghdad, he made headlines. He said, "This is a kiss from the Iraqi people." And he threw his shoes at Bush. Bush ducked just before he was tackled. People thought it was a spontaneous burst of anger at the Bush administration. Actually, he'd been planning the moment for years. He was a journalist, so he was accredited at getting into the press conference. He said, "I had to prepare everything because I was expected to be martyred. I wrote a will in preparation of the moment and everything. Well, he didn't die, but the torture he did endure after he was wrestled to the ground left him in quite a lot of pain. For those who saw the shoe throwing on TV, it looked like he was tackled to the floor, but then what followed was much worse. They broke his teeth and his nose, and they took him away and beat him with a pipe. They broke his leg. Throwing a shoe in the Arab world is the biggest insult to the enemy, of someone you resent," he said. George Bush lied on the international front when he said at a press conference that the Iraqi people would welcome the American army with flowers. I wanted to show everyone what the flowers would actually be that he would be receiving. And even the choice of shoes was made carefully. He said, "I put on a new pair of shoes, but I removed them and I wore an old pair instead." He said, "I realised that those pair of shoes came with me when I visited houses that had been destroyed by the war, victims of the violence, and when I walked past the dead bodies, that pair of shoes had the suffering of my people on their soles." After he had his nose and his leg and his teeth broken, he endured even more torture. They took him to a prison, he was given electric shock treatment, and then he was hit and waterboarded. He's got a lot of support from around the world. I remember at the time watching it on TV and the anchor man said, "I wonder if he's a Sunni or a Shia." Well, actually, he was a nationalist who was actually a follower of Che Guevara. But he said in his first press conference when he left prison that he doesn't see himself as a hero, rather as an oppressed man who has witnessed to his people being killed and his country invaded and soldiers repressing our people on a daily basis. But he said, "For those who stood by me and believe me to be a hero, I take their beautiful words as a great honour that shows me in the Iraqi people that the whole world stands against the invasion, with the first being the American people who were against their country's brutality." Does he have any regrets? "I do not regret throwing the shoe," he said. "My regret is that all I did was throw one shoe and not have more legs so I can throw 3, 4 or 5. So that I felt was kind of inspiring. It's the 10th anniversary and he gave an interview, and that sort of thing I think is something that helps keep the anti-war movement going. I do hope before you pack all your literature away that people will buy some. £5 for the report. I'd like everyone again to show your appreciation for Ben and Julio. And we'll spend a few minutes